It is the oldest question in the world, and no one has ever answered it to everyone's satisfaction. A child gets sick. A good man loses everything. A phone rings in the middle of the night, and somewhere inside you, a voice asks the question you were taught not to ask out loud. Why? Why do good people suffer? If there is a God, and He is good, and He is strong, then why this? You have felt it. Standing beside a hospital bed, reading the news, at a graveside on a gray afternoon. Every religion has tried to answer it. Every philosopher has taken a swing. But 3,000 years ago, someone did something braver than answer it. They wrote the question down. All of it. The rage, the confusion, the sheer unfairness. They set it in the middle of the Bible and refused to look away. It became one of the oldest books ever written, and one of the strangest. It is the story of a good man who loses everything for a reason he is never once told. His name is Job. And by the end of these 20 minutes, you will see why his story does not hand us an answer to suffering. It hands us something better. So let's begin, strangely, not on earth, but in heaven. There was a man in the land of Uz, and his name was Job. The Bible does not waste a single word describing him. He was blameless and upright. He feared God, and he turned away from evil. Not sinless, but whole. A man whose insides matched his outsides. And he was blessed. Extraordinarily blessed. 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, and 500 donkeys. A great household of servants. He was, the text says, the greatest man in all the East. And he had 10 children, 7 sons, and 3 daughters. When they feasted, Job would rise early and offer sacrifices for each of them, in case they had sinned in their hearts. That is the kind of man he was. Careful, devoted, good all the way down. If anyone on earth had earned a peaceful life, it was this man. Remember that, because it is the whole point. And then the story does something no other story dares to do. It pulls back the curtain and shows you heaven. There is a day when the sons of God come to present themselves before the Lord, the heavenly court, gathered before the throne. And among them comes another figure. The text calls him the Satan. Now be careful here, because this is important. In these ancient pages, that is not yet a proper name. Satan is a title. It means the accuser, the adversary, the prosecuting attorney of the heavenly court. He is the one who roams the earth, looking for a case to bring. And God does something surprising. He brings up Job. Have you considered my servant Job? There is none like him on the earth. Blameless, upright. And the accuser answers with a question. One of the most important questions in the whole Bible. Does Job fear God for nothing? In other words, of course he loves you. Look at everything you have given him. Take away the blessing, the accuser says, and watch. He will curse you to your face. And notice what that really is. It is an accusation not only against Job, but against God himself. Is anyone good for goodness sake? Or is all of it just a transaction? Does anyone love God, or do we only ever love what he gives? And God allows the test. All that he has is in your hand. Only do not lay a finger on the man himself. And the curtain closes. Job never hears a word of this. He never will. This is the key that unlocks the whole book, and Job is never given it. Everything he is about to suffer, he suffers completely in the dark. Hold that, and hold it tightly. He is at home, an ordinary day, like any other, and then a servant comes running. The oxen were plowing, and the donkeys grazing, when raiders fell upon them, and took them, and killed the servants. I alone have escaped to tell you. He is still speaking when a second messenger arrives. Fire fell from the sky and burned up the sheep and the shepherds. I alone have escaped to tell you." He is still speaking when a third comes through the door. Raiders formed 3 companies, seized the camels, and put the servants to the sword. I alone have escaped to tell you. 3 messengers. Everything Job owns, gone in a single afternoon. But he is still standing, because none of that is what truly breaks a man. And then the 4th messenger comes. And this one is different. Your sons and your daughters were feasting together in their oldest brother's house, and a great wind came across the wilderness and struck the 4 corners of the house. It fell upon the young people, and they are dead. I alone have escaped to tell you, all 10, in a moment, on an ordinary day. And here the whole story holds its breath. What will he do now? Job stood up. He tore his robe. He shaved his head. And then he fell to the ground and worshipped. And he spoke the words that people have whispered at gravesides for 3,000 years. Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked shall I return. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. In all this, Job did not sin or charge God with any wrong. Sit with that for a moment. He does not understand. He is not told why. And still, in the wreckage of everything, he bows. That is not weakness. That is a faith with roots deeper than his circumstances. The accuser had lost the first round, but he was not finished. Again the heavenly court gathers. Again the accuser comes, and he raises the stakes. Skin for skin. All that a man has he will give for his own life. Let it touch his own body, his bones, and his flesh, and then he will curse you. And again God permits it, with one limit. He is in your hand. Only spare his life. And Job is struck with painful sores, from the soles of his feet to the crown of his head. The greatest man in the East is now a figure of agony, scraping his skin with a piece of broken pottery. He leaves his house. He goes out and sits down in a heap of ashes. And there, at the very bottom, comes the cruelest moment of all. His wife, who has lost all 10 of those children too, looks at him and says the thing part of him must already be thinking. Do you still hold on to your integrity? Curse God and die. And Job answers her gently, even now. Shall we receive good from God, and shall we not receive evil? And in all this, Job did not sin with his lips. Word of his suffering spreads. And 3 friends hear of it, and come from far away to comfort him. Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, Zophar the Naamathite. And the first thing they do is the best thing they do. They see him from a distance and can barely recognize him. They weep. They tear their own robes, and they sit down beside him on the ground. For 7 days and 7 nights, not one of them says a single word, because they saw that his suffering was very great. Hold on to that picture. 3 friends in the dust, in silence, for a whole week. It may be the wisest thing anyone does in the entire book. When someone you love is drowning in grief, you do not need the right words. Most of the time, there are no right words. You just need to sit down in the ashes beside them and stay. Because the moment they open their mouths, everything begins to go wrong. Job breaks the silence first. And what comes out is not a prayer. It is a scream. He curses the day he was born. Let that day be darkness. Why did I not die at birth? He does not curse God, but he wishes with all his heart that he had never existed. And this is the honesty that makes the book of Job holy. It lets a suffering man say the unsayable right there on the page of Scripture. And now the friends respond. And to understand them, you have to understand what they believe. They hold to something scholars call the retribution principle. It is a simple, tidy, and utterly terrible piece of theology. It goes like this. The world is fair. God blesses the good and punishes the wicked. So if you are suffering, really suffering, then you must have done something to deserve it. Good people prosper. Bad people suffer. It is clean. It is logical. And it is a lie that has tortured hurting people ever since. It is the whisper that finds you at the hospital bed. What did I do to deserve this? It sounds like faith. But the book of Job was written, in part, to take that whisper by the throat. Eliphaz goes first, and he is gentle at the start. Think, Job. Who, being innocent, ever perished? Bildad is blunter. Does God pervert justice? Your children must have sinned against him. Zophar is the cruelest of the three. God, he says, is actually punishing you less than you deserve. Round after round, 3 whole cycles of speeches, they say the same thing 100 different ways. Confess. Repent. There is a hidden sin here somewhere. Just admit it, and God will restore you. And Job, in his agony, will not lie about himself just to make them comfortable. He knows he is not perfect, but he knows this suffering is not a punishment, and he refuses to pretend it is. So he does something extraordinary. He argues with his friends and with God himself. He demands a hearing. He wants his day in court. He wants to ask God to his face why. Sometimes he sinks beneath the waves. Man born of woman is of few days and full of trouble. But then, out of the very depths, he says something that leaps 1,000 years ahead of him. Oh, that my words were written. Oh, that they were engraved in the rock forever. For I know that my Redeemer lives, and at the last he will stand upon the earth. And after my skin has been destroyed, yet in my flesh I shall see God. In the middle of the darkest book in the Bible, a man who has lost everything says it. I know that my Redeemer lives. He does not have an answer, but he has a hope he cannot explain. One day he will see God, and God will be on his side. Notice that this hope does not erase his pain. He goes right back to arguing and grieving in the very next breath. Hope and anguish can live in the same heart at the same time. Job proves it. At last, the 3 friends run out of words. They cannot move him, and he cannot move them. And then a new voice speaks. A younger man named Elihu, who has been listening this whole time. He is angry at the friends for condemning Job without ever answering him, and at Job for justifying himself instead of God. The young man says what the old men were too proud to admit. Their wisdom has failed. And Elihu adds something the others completely missed. That perhaps suffering is not always punishment. Perhaps sometimes it is a discipline, a refining, a voice trying to break through. That God speaks in the night, in a dream, in pain, to turn a person back and save their soul. Elihu gets closer than the others, but he still cannot see behind the curtain. He still has no idea what happened in heaven. And then even Elihu falls silent, because something is coming. A storm gathers on the far horizon, and then the Lord answers Job out of the whirlwind. For 38 chapters, Job has been begging God to speak. Now, at last, God speaks. And it is nothing that anyone expects. He does not explain. He never mentions the accuser. He never mentions the wager. He asks questions. Who is this that darkens my counsel with words without knowledge? Brace yourself like a man. Now I will question you. And then begins the most breathtaking poetry in the entire Hebrew Bible. Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Tell me, if you have understanding. Where were you when the morning stars sang together, and all the sons of God shouted for joy? Have you ever commanded the morning? Have you shown the dawn its place? Who shut in the sea behind doors, when it burst out roaring from the womb? Have you entered the storehouses of the snow? Have you seen where the hail is kept? Where does the light live? And where is the home of darkness? Can you bind the chains of the Pleiades, or loosen the cords of Orion? And then God takes Job on a tour of the wild. Who feeds the raven when its young cry out to God? Who set the wild donkey loose and free? Did you give the horse his strength and clothe his neck with rolling thunder? Does the hawk take flight by your wisdom? Does the eagle mount up at your command? On and on it rolls. An ocean of creatures, and stars, and storms, and seas. And then the two great beasts. Behemoth, who moves like a mountain. Leviathan, whom no one dares to wake. Creatures far too wild for Job to tame, and yet held, effortlessly, in the hand of God. Now, do you notice what is missing from all of this? There is not one word of explanation. God never tells Job why. He never says, "Job, there was a test." He never defends himself at all. Instead, he does something stranger and far deeper. He shows Job a universe of staggering wildness and beauty and order that Job did not build and cannot begin to understand. As if to say, the world is far larger and far stranger and far more tenderly cared for than your questions can hold. You cannot run it. But I can. And I am not absent. I number the stars and I feed the ravens. And somehow, and this is the mystery at the very heart of the book, that turns out to be enough. Not an answer. A presence. The very thing Job had asked for all along. He never really wanted a lecture on the problem of suffering. He wanted to know that God was there and that God had not turned away. He wanted to see God, and now, in the storm, he does. And Job answers. And his answer is very short. I know that you can do all things. I have spoken of things I did not understand, things too wonderful for me. And then comes the line the whole book has been climbing toward. I had heard of you by the hearing of the ear, but now my eye sees you. Do you hear the change? Before, Job knew about God. Now, Job knows God. Suffering never got him an explanation. It got him something he had never had before. It got him God, up close. Therefore, he says, I despise myself and repent in dust and ashes. Not repenting of some secret sin the friends had imagined. He was right about that all along. He is laying down his demand to understand. He is trading his need for an answer for the God who is bigger than any answer. And here is the quiet miracle of it. When you finally meet the one who holds the whole universe, the question that was crushing you does not get answered. It gets carried. It stops being a weight you have to hold alone. And there, in the ashes, with nothing left in his hands, Job is finally at peace. Then God turns to the three friends, and he is angry with them. You have not spoken of me what is right, as my servant Job has. Sit with that a moment. The men who defended God were wrong. The man who argued with God was right, because God would far rather have your honest anguish than your dishonest praise. And who does God send them to pray for them? Job, the very man they had condemned. Job prays for his friends, and it is in forgiving them that his own healing begins. And the Lord restored the fortunes of Job, and gave him twice as much as he had before. 14,000 sheep, 6,000 camels, 1,000 yoke of oxen, and 1,000 donkeys. And 10 more children were born to him, 7 sons and 3 daughters, the most beautiful in all the land. But be careful how you read this ending. It is not a prize that erases the pain. The new children do not replace the 10 who died. No child ever replaces another. That grief was real, and it stayed real. The book is honest enough to let restoration and loss stand in the same room. Job is blessed again, yes, but he is also a father who buried 10 children, and he will carry that for the rest of his 140 years. The book refuses to tie a neat bow. It never once tells Job about the wager. The deepest why is never answered on the page. What Job is given instead is bigger than an explanation, a God vast enough to trust in the dark, and a permission you may need to hear today, that you are allowed to bring God your grief, your anger, your unanswered why. Job did, and God called him the one who spoke rightly. So when the phone rings in the night and the oldest question rises again, remember the man in the ashes. He never got his answer. He got something better. He saw God, and that was enough to live on.